how we can live as humans to be in stronger connection, to experience more joy, more love, more bliss, and the pathway to get there. And I was blown away. It allows you to be more free, to create, to express, to feel, to play, and to enjoy all that life has to offer. Well, hello, friends. Welcome to Unapologetically Yours. I'm your host, Ashley Logan, and I am so happy to have you here today. This is a podcast where we go deep on everything from spirituality to relationships and connection to business and belief systems. Because in a world when we've been taught to play by the rules, it's time to live unapologetically. So I'm Ashley, and I am an entrepreneur. I am a mother of 3 little kids. I am a spiritual wayfinder, and I wear a million different hats in my life, and I am proud of that. And so we are gonna go a little bit more spiritual today, and I'm really excited. I think it's super appropriate in light of the state of the world that we take a look at some of the belief systems that have shaped our way of being and shaped us as individuals. And so I want to start by saying that since I was a little girl, I've been a conduit for the divine. And that means that I feel sort of the vibration of love and light vibrate through me. And that sounds maybe weird, but it's the truth. And I felt deeply, deeply connected to Christ consciousness, and I identify as a Christian. I was raised Lutheran, and the way that I feel closest to God is through prayer and through song and through time in nature. And so I've been a singer my whole life, and I am outside as often as I possibly can be, because that's where I tune in to the messages of love that I believe are waiting for each and every one of us. And the Bible is a really beautiful thing because it talks about love more than anything else. But there's some drawbacks to this, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in season 2. And really the problem with modern religion is that many of the books of the Bible were handpicked by men hundreds of years after Jesus walked the earth. And that Christ consciousness and that message of love, I believe, got a little bit diluted. And I also very much believe that we are at our best as people when we have the balance of the divine masculine and the divine feminine within ourselves. And I believe that there is a toxic masculine and a toxic feminine, and that as people and individuals, we carry the wounds of that toxicity. And that's why healing practices are so vital as we start to kind of repair some of the damages that come from walking the earth and the experiences that we have as people. But fundamentally, I believe very much that Jesus is a conduit of love, a supporter of love, and that he loves me just as much as the men on this planet, and that balance between masculine and feminine is something that I believe was a strong foundation of his teaching that was emitted from the Bible as we know it. And I do believe that the damage that caused has been paramount on our society. So I've always been in question of organized religion because I found it so deeply hard to believe that the Native Americans were going to hell because they didn't know Jesus. And I just thought that was ridiculous. So the dogma of organized religion and the fear and the control and all of those things are things that we need to examine if we're going to perpetuate the spirit of love on this planet, and also just recognize the man-made elements and the patriarchal elements that have worked their way into organized religion. And this was really tested for me when I was at Young Life Camp in it was like 1999. I was 16 years old, and my best friend mother was Jewish, and she was also terminally ill. And one of the counselors there looked my best friend in the eye and told her that her mother was going to hell because she didn't know Jesus. And we were like, well, fuck this shit. And we got up and we walked out. And even though we were in Colorado and we couldn't like hitchhike home, we took a stand and we left that room because that wasn't the the God that I know. That wasn't the love from Jesus that I know. That is, if this, then that. And I do believe that Christ consciousness is something that's accessible. I believe that the love lies within each of us. And I believe that the human experience is one that is meant to be enjoyed, and that we're meant to experience love and pleasure and delight, and the delight of being human. And that is one of the gifts that we have from God, that we shouldn't live in fear of one another, and that we should love one another. And that is the answer, and that was the intention of Jesus coming when he did. I also believe that Jesus had a partnership with Mary Magdalene that has been deeply twisted and misrepresented over the course of time. Historians and theologians would venture to agree, and I'm going to have some of those people on our show this season. So stay tuned for more on that. But the area that I want to go into today is what it means to tune in, what it means to tune in and listen. And this is something that I talk about quite a bit when I'm say, okay, meditation and tuning in and creating space for, and all of those things are so important. But what are we tuning in to achieve? What are we listening for? Well, for me, when I am in a meditative state, this is when I get clear downloads. And what are downloads? They're insights and wisdom, and almost as if it's a voice coming through with something that this feels true. And the way that I know that it's a download or information from the divine or my own body wisdom or just a breakthrough is that it feels true and it doesn't feel scary. There's no ego in this information, and also no doubt. It kind of lands and comes and is okay, this is something I need to pay attention to. So for me, I've always felt a very strong connection to the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and the characteristics and the attributes of both. And I can recognize the masculine and feminine energy within my own body. And as I lean in and lean out of both of those identities on a daily and regular basis and try to keep them in check. And so I want to share an experience that I had about this pathway of the human experience that came to me in deep meditative state. And it came to me as a message from the divine feminine about humanity and about our access to joy and bliss and heaven on earth, and making the most of the human experience. And the message was about love and compassion for one another, and how we can hold each other accountable to create safety that allows us to experience more joy and fun and play, and ultimately have a life of a higher vibration, a blissful life experience. And I'm going to get into what that exact pathway looked like in a second. But what was really interesting is that then, after I had this sort of mystical experience where very, very, very detailed about what these steps are to achieve bliss in life, I then was traveling down to Costa Rica for a retreat, a facilitator training retreat. And it was like one of these ridiculous experiences where the plane had no internet, and I had a rolling bag and then this like giant heavy duffel, and they checked my rolling bag. And so I'm trying to carry this big duffel and it doesn't fit under the seat in front of me. So I have to put it up in the overhead bin, but then it turns out the plane has no internet. So I just grab one of the books from my duffel, and it was a book that was on my list called Mary Magdalene Revealed by Megan Watterson. And so I threw the bag up into the actually it was like a really big shove to get this heavy ass bag up into the overhead bin. And I had a long flight to dive into this book, and I was blown away. Okay, because there was a lot of things that I learned here, and we're going to dive further into this later in the season. But first of all, that Mary Magdalene had a book of the Bible, and she had the direct ear of Jesus. And so she had a lot of wisdom to share that didn't make it into the Bible. In fact, all 8 or 9 of the copies of her book that were found in the 80s had the same pages ripped out of it that whoever, Constantine in the year 300 didn't want people to hear or know about. But Mary Magdalene was a priestess of Isis. She was a trained, anointed priestess, and she was actually the one who anointed Jesus. And their partnership, of course, was deeply synergistic. And throughout this book, Mary Magdalene revealed, they talk about how Mary and Jesus were in an intimate relationship, that Jesus kissed her on the mouth, and it sounded like they were actually married, and may have had a daughter too, Sarah. But this is, again, we'll dive into it in another episode. But Mary was painted as a whore in the year 1500 by Pope John the Third, Fifth, Eighth, I don't know, called her a whore, and that changed the identity. Actually, my sisters and I were reflecting on this recently, that we were in church on Easter Sunday when we were little girls, and one of the pastors said, "Mary Magdalene's a whore," on Easter. This is all not true. And so I think so much about the damage that created for women who are navigating Christianity and women who are navigating life without that representation in the Bible. And that has become so deeply paternalistic and deeply patriarchal. And it's also not the intention of Jesus. And so at the risk, well, not even at the risk, but at the risk of going too far down this rabbit hole, I want to call this back and say that the most fascinating thing about this book was the breakdown that Megan Watterson did of Mary and the pathway to bliss, the pathway to heaven on earth. And so what was so interesting to me is that the steps were almost identical to what had been revealed to me in deep meditation as a divine download. So I'm like freaking the fuck out. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is wild and something I need to pay attention to. Oddly enough, the plane had been delayed, so then I missed my connection, and then I couldn't walk around because this duffel was like seriously heavy. So all I could do was sit and read this book, and I read it end to end. And the second that I finished it, they're like, okay, now boarding your flight to Costa Rica. So it was important information for me to have going into this facilitator training. And then when I got there, we went through so many different types of workshops and things, from sound meditation to breath work. And my friend Mary Hagee was leading us in group breath work. And Mary is going to be a guest on our show. And I cannot wait for you to hear from her, because she has just this incredible wisdom. She is an energy worker, a healer, but she also is someone who tunes into the downloads and the guidance that she gets from sitting in stillness and silence. And she's going to share more about what that has opened up for her in her life. And it's so cool. I can't wait for you guys to hear from her. But as Mary led this breath work, I had another vision during the breath work of Mary and Jesus coming to me together and kissing my cheeks, calling me their daughter, and talking about these steps. So I got 3 different experiences about how we can live as humans to be in stronger connection, to experience more joy, more love, more bliss, and the pathway to get there. So I'm going to share. I know this is the moment you've been waiting for. Okay, so this is the mystic's pathway to truth, love, and bliss that was shared with me in multiple ways. 1, love is the start, but it is not enough. We know this from our own experiences, that we can be loved by a parent, but if they mistreat us, then if we don't trust them, it's not enough. It's not enough to feel whole and safe and in full appreciation of that relationship. But love is the start, and love is the answer for so much of our experiences on earth. We are all one. We are all worthy of love, and no one person is better than the other, and that there is that divine love that each of us can access within ourselves. And it's just so vital and beautiful that it is the start of the destination. The next step is truth. The next key tenet of finding bliss in your life is truth. You must speak truth and be unafraid of it. And that means holding the people in your life accountable when they disappoint you. That means speaking your feelings, even though it's hard when someone has disappointed you, or sharing when you're afraid of something, sharing when someone is doing something that is not meeting your expectations, being honest about it. And also, I want to say this is so important, that this isn't just about the relationships that we have with other people or our partners or intimate relationships, but this applies to the relationship we have with our children and with ourselves. So being honest with ourselves, speaking truth to ourselves, that is so vital when we're looking at things like examining the inner critic, when it comes to examining things like when we hear gossip about someone else. Is this true? Is this true? And asking that question. Okay, so this is why truth is so important. Truth is the key facet of building trust. And only within trust can we have safety. So let's talk about the key tenets of trust. Trust are boundaries. It's consistency. And trust, by the way, is definitely a masculine energy. And what I think we can really appreciate in the divine masculine, it's showing up consistently. It is setting boundaries. It's being accountable. And it's honoring the agreements that we make all throughout the day. Trust is so important. It's following through on the things that we say that we're going to do. And with trust creates safety. And safety is the most important part of the next piece of this, which is pleasure. Again, we're not just talking about intimate pleasure or intimate relationships. We're talking about joy, fun, play. And when you are with people that you trust, it allows you to be more free, to create, to express, to feel, to play, and to enjoy all that life has to offer. I think about how important it is that it's very, very difficult to just have love and then be expected to go into a state of full authentic play with someone. And that doesn't work, and it's not as fulfilling. But when you do have trust, that means that the play and the pleasure is that much more fulfilling. It's that much more invigorating. It's that much more cup filling. And then begins this fountain of love and growth and joy and learning and togetherness. And these things, these steps are all the pathway to creating bliss, that higher vibration, that higher divine light, that love, that expression that allows us to operate in our purpose and our passion and our power, so that we can experience all that love has to offer, all of the connection, all of the wisdom. And these steps are not a destination. It's not something that you check off your list. It's something that we must come back to every day. So when you think about the relationships in your life right now, where it's like, okay, so why am I not laughing with this person? Why am I not having a good time? Why am I not enjoying myself? Start to kind of go through the steps and start with, start with truth. Is there something that I need to say that I haven't said? Is there something that I need to share that I haven't said? Or where am I lying to myself about this relationship? Or what am I lying to myself about here? Is this a place I don't even really want to be, if I'm honest? So start with that truth. And then the trust. Think about, gosh, am I in alignment with this scenario? Am I honoring myself? Am I being accountable to myself? Have I honored the agreements that I've made? Am I showing up in integrity? And if you can't answer those questions, then don't expect yourself to be in a state of total delight and enjoyment and pleasure. But these are tools for you to have those conversations so you can achieve that state. And again, you can be in different places with different people in your life. But the goal is that you get into the habit of reflecting the love that we have for each other back to them by speaking the truth about how other people make us feel, and good and bad, so that we can offer that guidance. We can show up for people in the way that that is most aligned. And these steps will help us to live more authentically, to examine where people can, maybe it's time to make a change of people in our world. And the piece that is probably the hardest for us in this like deeply, deeply self-conscious culture is that we are so attached to outcomes. And so that's why it's sometimes scary to speak truth. It's sometimes scary to tell someone like, I'm disappointed in you, because of how they might react. But by loosening our grip on the attachment to how they're going to react to our truth, it might surprise you how people start showing up. And the relief that you might feel for living more authentically and being in alignment is those are the things that you can take responsibility for, not how other people react to when you're sharing your own insights. So we covered a ton of ground today. Would love to answer any questions or hear any thoughts, but go through these steps in your mind and start to see how maybe you're not speaking your mind and what role you're playing in the lack of joy. And not to point fingers and make you the villain or the victim or anything in your life, but just saying that there are ways that you can take accountability so you can achieve that state of bliss, that higher buzz, that higher level of consciousness, that higher vibration that we also deserve when it comes to experiencing life on this planet and optimizing our relationships and living in the spirit of love and trust instead of fear and scarcity. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode today. I'm grateful that you're here, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit more of the spiritual side of me that we haven't gone into as much detail about. I'm here to answer any questions that you have. Always just a reminder to go ahead and like, subscribe, share. All of those things are so important when it comes to getting people's attention for a podcast. And please leave us a review. We would love to hear from you. Those reviews truly matter, and your feedback is always so important. So feel free to shoot us an email, reach out through the website, and I'm available anytime at Ashley D. Logan on Instagram and at the Unapologetically Yours podcast on Instagram as well. So go out, make some mischief in the world, keep asking those questions, and until next time, I'm Ashley Logan, and I am unapologetically yours.